in the first week in particular, there are a few things that I have pretty much consistently see cause massive problems. So the first obvious one is do not go on social media. When we get hurt, there can be a tendency to lash out or a tendency to try and access support. And if you go on social media and say, hey, my partner did this, I can't believe that this happened, the reality is you are definitely going to get a reaction. And there may be some short-term wins from that. The only problem is that what happens is that when you put this out there, people are not so much reacting to you. They're reacting to their own experiences, their own perceptions, their own prejudices, and that will come back. And again, some of it's going to feel nice, but there's going to be a lot of that stuff that is going to be really hard and really difficult. And actually, the clients have often found that some of the stuff comes back is just incredibly painful, massively amplifies the wound. And the other thing that happens is where people decide that they want the relationship to continue, the stuff on media, because even if you delete it, it still sits there in people's memories. And so there's suddenly all of these additional repairs that you need to do with people who are tangentially connected to your life. And it just creates so much additional work. And what we need is support. We're going to talk about how you get that kind of support, but we don't use social media as the way to do that. I think for most people, this is going to be one of the more obvious no's to stay away from, particularly if there's a revenge impulse to shame your partner. It's a costly thing that in most cases will back.
And I would suppose that if a person goes into social media to try to search for whoever your partner betrayed you with, that you really can't find anything good from that either, other than just more headaches and pain and long-term suffering.
There's been cases where that's happened, and then the other person feels exposed, feels attacked, and then will often start a pretty significant fight back campaign. And bear in mind, when we're hurt and when we're angry, it has a whole bunch of anesthetic qualities. It's easier to be mad at someone rather than to sit with the feelings of sadness and betrayal. You're still inflicting emotional wounds that are going to need to be healed and repaired.
And so then the second one is don't tell the kids.
Absolutely. Now, this is one of the ones that people may feel very challenged by. And we're not, and absolutely, please hear me, I'm not saying never tell the kids, because the reality is your kids aren't stupid. They are going to pick up that stuff is happening in the relationship. Unless obviously the kid was the one that found you or whatever, then you need to have a conversation about that. If that was the case, I would be saying get to a professional to get some advice about that pretty darn quickly. And I would still be recommending that you hold it a little bit with the kid to say, hey, we do need to about that stuff. We're just sorting that. We will come back to you. You have quite a short time frame to get some help in terms of that. And so I'd be really reaching out for an emergency consult with someone just to get some support. But if the kids are not involved, the kids didn't know, you really want to get some input from a professional, because children of different ages are going to need different kinds of support. There are other more important things, because the minute you tell the kid, they're immediately going to go to, okay, what does this mean for me in terms of safety? You and my parent still going to be together? What happens to me? Because kids are typically more focused on the impact for them. With teenagers, even with younger kids, there will be a tendency to polarize, which again, if you're trying to repair the relationship, and even actually if you're not trying to repair the relationship, that creates really long-term problem. And the challenge that you're going to have is because you're in most cases in such an emotional, difficult, challenged state, it's really hard for you to send the message in a way that all of the kind of intense emotions that you're experiencing aren't coming through. And what that does provoke for kids is a strong protective or often an overwhelm response. So they end up getting dumped and loaded with your emotional problems and your partner's emotional problems, which are not theirs to carry. They didn't cause the relationship, they didn't cause the affair. It's not their fault, and it's not theirs to be loaded with. They do need information, but the way that information is delivered is really important in order to protect them and take care of them. So what we're saying is, until you've sat down with a professional, do not tell the kids, and just kind of hold that information. You might say something like, yeah, we're having a challenging time. Mummy or daddy's feeling distressed right now. I'm going to be okay. I'm just working through that. Sometimes adults have hard times. something generic. But again, just don't dump that on the kids. And if you don't even have to have that conversation for that first week or so, that's generally a good thing. One of the important things just to be aware of this in terms of the intensity in the first 1 to 3 days after disclosure is sky high. And then what will tend to happen is it will tend to come down to just being really high for about the first couple of weeks. Then it's going to drop again. So if you could just get through that first week, that first 2 weeks, your ability to process is going to be like 1,000,000 times higher.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting the way you describe that. I remember that in psychiatric hospitals in the United States, when people are at their most at risk, they're held for 72 hours. So for 3 days. I remember hearing hypnotherapists talk about how it takes the unconscious 2 weeks to process through something. So the idea of a couple weeks just makes a lot of sense. And to summarize what you said, the first goal is to give yourself enough time to get your feet under yourself so you're not dysregulated, you're not dizzy with the intense emotions, and then to contact a family therapist type of person or a social worker in order to know how to appropriately approach your kids with their developmental level and to make sure that you're not so emotionally distraught you're harming your kids.
If you're more regulated and your kids are more regulated, that makes that next process as you move through the recovery process significantly easier.
And so what is the third irrevocable no?
All right, now this is the one that's going to be challenging. So the third irrevocable no is do not interrogate your partner in the sense of asking why. Okay, now this is going to feel super, super hard to do, and probably by the time you've even watched this video, you will have already done that, and there is a reason why this is in the first video. Part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, is our executive center, and it's in charge of understanding and analyzing life and making sense of stuff so that we can move forward. So that red shiny berry, is it delicious or is it poisonous? I can hear a thumping on the ground. Does that mean that people are dancing outside, or there's a herd of buffalo about to trample the house? What's the message? What's the why thing? And so what happens is when we ask a why question and then we get some understanding, there's a relief that comes with us. Now, at the moment, you are in desperate amounts of pain. Okay, and so the searching for relief is entirely human, entirely normal. It's the most normal, natural thing in the world. If you're seeing this, your partner in front of you, you've just found out this information, and you might want to know what is it what's actually happened, who is it, why has it happened, all of those kind of things. You're going to have a bunch of questions that will come up. And again, unconsciously, what you're doing is you're looking for relief. The other thing that happens is when asking question takes us into the prefrontal cortex, so it's the cognitive part of our brain, which is a bit disconnected from our emotions, which tend to be more oriented in our body, which is where we're experiencing all this intense pain. So by shifting it into a cognitive or a logical level, there's again a bit of an escape pattern that's happening from pain. And so it's going to feel pretty irresistible. Now, hear me really clearly here. Why questions are very important. They're just not important now in the first couple of weeks. Okay, so what I would like you to do is I would like you to take your why question and write them down somewhere or record them on a computer or something, all the different why questions that you have, because those are the things that you can come into a therapy process down the track. You'll be doing is trying to figure out what's the bit that sits underneath the why. Yeah, so why did you choose blah blah blah? And the question might be it could be different for every person. Is the question underneath the why may run to, do you not find me attractive anymore? Okay, now often people don't start off with that question. They'll ask a question like, why did you go with them? Was it because they were blah? Was it because they were blah? What was it because they were blah? And then your partner again is often back in that defensive, trying to get the right answer. So they may be lying or gaslighting or whatever, but they're so panicked in that state that A, you're not going to believe anything that they say, and then B, if they give you an answer because it's not the core question that's sitting underneath, then you're going to have another question, and then another question, and another question. So even if they're not flooded on the first question, like the 15th question, they're going to be super flooded. Them getting flooded is going to flood you more, so you're going to end up feeling worse, less trusting, less anchored, less secure, none of which is helpful for you at this point in time.
And I would suppose that if a person's being interrogated and they're not really sure what to do with themselves, they might just start making up answers on the spot.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then
Or
your
they
ability
lie.
to trust will get worse. And then
Yeah,
the trust will even get worse after that because now you just caught them in a lie. How many other lies were there?
yeah, yeah. And so then it can become this compounding thing, which really takes people into a pretty kind of paranoid state, which, given that you've been betrayed already and gaslit, you're already set up illegitimately for distrust. This interrogation cycle can really push that over the edge. And then often the partner who's flooded going, oh my God, you're so paranoid, what's your problem? And so again, you're losing more support, you're being attacked while you're already in this really awful situation. So your why questions are super important. Write them down. That's the critical piece. What you need to do in the meantime, in terms of safety issues. So if you're wondering, was it a sexual relationship? Was my partner using protection? Is there stuff like that? There is some basic stuff that you need to do in terms of saying, go and get an STD check done.
So are you saying for the person who found out they were betrayed, do they go and get an STD test or do they ask their partner to do that?
I would do both. The things you know for sure is that your partner has told you lies. They're not immediately going to start telling you the truth is foolish. And to basically say, whatever, for my peace of mind, go and get an STD check, put some data on the board. You don't need to ask them why, but you can write my questions down.
You can use that concrete information to feel better. However, to summarize, what you're saying is catch yourself from asking why questions, interrogating, because you're not going to get the information you need. You're not going to feel safer.